being here, and we obviously, the Republicans have decided that we have a week left of this session. And, you know, it's really interesting to see what their priorities are. When you look at what, we have roughly 100 bills up today, and you look at not only what they're doing, but what are they not doing in this legislative session. And we just saw Thursday's calendar came out late Friday. And the interesting thing is when you look across the spectrum and all the statistics about the areas where Wisconsin has soft spots, where we need to make improvements. You know, the Pew Charitable Research on the middle class being in the roughest shape of all. You look at being in the bottom third for jobs. You look at third worst in student debt, which we're going to have a couple of people speak on that next, since that's a big issue today. Obviously, corrections now has become a huge issue since we've learned that the governor knew 3 years ago about the fact that we had serious problems at Lincoln Hills. And then education, which obviously has been an issue where they're taking $800 million over the next 10 years out of public schools, and then today they'll go even further. So today's agenda is really noteworthy for what they're not doing. But what they are doing is unfortunately very harmful. You really just can't seem to trust the Republicans to do what's right, to take up the major priorities that the people of Wisconsin care about. And when they do bring up bills, it's to further diminish the public schools. It's to take steps that make the environment in worse shape in Wisconsin, which also is important for our economy, for tourism and our natural sporting heritage. And we're just very disappointed when we see what their priorities are. And we're going to start today. I want to call on Representative Jill Billings, who's done such a nice job, and then Representative Dana Wachs, who's been ranking on the committee, to talk about what they are not doing and what is so simple to do on the issue of higher ed lower debt. Representative Billings, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Barca. I will say when I first started in the Capitol, that's when I first was part of a Democrat initiative to hammer away at what's happening with people in our state with higher ed and our lower debt bill. We know that student loan debt is holding back Wisconsin. Nearly 1 million Wisconsinites and their families are burdened with student debt that equals $19 billion. So I was excited actually when the Republicans said they were going to finally join us and take up this issue. And I've been incredibly underwhelmed since I first got a chance to look at this legislation. They only help a small fraction of the borrowers that we have in Wisconsin. 32,000 people over 5 years will be helped by their legislation, and we know that we have around 1 million Wisconsinites who are saddled with student loan debt. That helps a very, very narrow piece of our population, where our plan would allow refinancing of student loan debt and actually help people in a real way where they would have lower monthly debts. Just as people can now refinance car loans and mortgages, we would help with that also. In committee, we had a lot of questions about the legislation. We brought up amendments on every single piece of legislation in their package to make it better. And unfortunately, they would not go along with us and meet us in a bipartisan manner on a single piece that we brought forward to help make these bills better. Especially frustrating to me was $700,000 that goes to UW System and DWD for positions to build our bureaucracy to help students find internships. They would not allow us to track whether they're paid or unpaid internships. They would not allow us to add extra money to make sure that there's a stipend there for students. There are a lot of students that I talk to in my district in La Crosse who quite honestly are working their way through college. They don't have time for unpaid internships. So an unpaid internship does nothing to make college more affordable for students, and an unpaid internship has no part in a so-called college affordability plan. Now I think the ranking member, Dana Wachs, is going to give you a few comments on this legislation too.
I think one of the things I've noticed around here is that it seems that the other side of the aisle loses track of the ball. What is important, what isn't at this time? We have just seen, since 2011, $2 billion cut from education, 1.05 billion from K through 12, 795 million from the university systems, and 203 million from the technical colleges. Now let's think about that for a minute, because in reality, what's happening with industry in this country? Recently on, I think it was January 13, Jeffrey Immelt, the chairman of General Electric, spoke in great detail about how General Electric is moving from Connecticut to Boston because of the research done at the universities in Boston, and how entire new industries are being created through that research. So at the very moment that industry understands full well the importance and power of higher educational institutions, this legislature, under the Republican leadership, chose this time to drastically cut our investment in higher education. Now, at the last moment, during an election year, they're throwing crumbs at the problem that they created in the first place. In no way do these bills address the problems that were created by Republican leadership. At the very moment we need our higher education systems more than ever, they're undermined by Republican leadership in this building. So we don't see that these educational bills that are being brought to the floor today are of any consequence whatsoever in terms of addressing the true problem. The true problem is we need to support our education systems, and we need to start doing it in a meaningful fashion.
Next, Representative Pope, who chaired the Education Committee, we're in the majority, and now is ranking member. He's going to talk about the bill that we have up today that the Speaker hijacked from another bill.
Yes, that was very interesting. There was a bill that was brought forward by a Republican, and it simply fixed a flaw in the mechanism that was going to be able to allow a few special needs kids to be able to get into the special needs voucher scholarship program. And we were all prepared to take a yes vote on that, feeling that this is the right thing to do for 3 families who kind of gotten caught in the red tape. And lo and behold, Representative Voss came along and attached an amendment to that bill, which was completely non-germane, had nothing to do with it, and took it off into a completely different direction of how vouchers are going to be funded in the future. And if you know about how schools are paid for, that money is either going to come out of GPR or it's going to come from the taxes that school districts are able to levy. And if it's not coming from those 2 places, then it's got to come right out of the budget of the resident school district where those voucher students used to go or would have attended. And that's what he did. It would have caused huge damage to school districts that are already strapped with the largest cut to school funding in Wisconsin's history. And then to bring this insult in on top of it. And it's just going to keep going forward because now we're lifting the enrollment caps on voucher schools, so we have no idea how many more are going to be coming along. And it's going to take years to pay for these students as they work through the system, up to 5 years. So it's a terrible bill. It was a terrible amendment. But our grassroots people, the stakeholders, caught on to this, though there was only 24 hours notice to do so. And they started reaching out to legislators. So this got back down by about half. So instead of $22 million, now it's only going to hurt public schools $15 million. Well, that still wasn't good enough. That came with a 1-day notice. So our understanding is that there may be a deal in the make right now. So I have no idea really what we're going to see on the floor when AB 751 comes. But we need to be prepared and ready to understand that we, Democrats, are here to protect our public schools, to make sure that they are funded to the best of our ability, and we will continue to do that going forward. And we are just so concerned and disappointed on behalf of the community schools, the public schools at home, and all of those people trying to provide the very best services for our students. This doesn't help, and we want to be here to help.
We should be using this floor period to demand accountability, transparency, and action on a situation that has alarmed and disturbed many people We've seen in the past few months many different media accounts related to Lincoln Hills and the potential pattern of abuse and violence that has occurred there. While it seems that the buck not only doesn't stop with the governor, but it seems to fly over his head, we think it's important, Assembly Democrats think it's important to call not only for an audit of the entire Department of Corrections, but also we're calling for a series of oversight hearings. So we'll be introducing a privileged resolution today to make sure that we not only call for an audit of the Department of Corrections, but also have oversight hearings related to both the juvenile and adult corrections programs and facilities, and report back to the legislature before September. This is an urgent issue and it requires urgent attention. I know I'm disappointed that the governor has said, even though press has made clear, and the judge from Racine County made clear that the allegations of sexual and physical assault at Lincoln Hills were documented as far back as February 2012. We're disappointed that the governor has allowed the buck to fly over his head and say that he had nothing to do with it. We want action, we want transparency, we want accountability. It starts with an audit. Assembly Democrats held a hearing on Friday, held a press release and letter calling for an audit on Friday. We'll be talking about this on the floor today, and we'll continue to demand action. This is just a pattern of circumstances in which we see the governor, when he has letters mailed to his office, when he has a BCI letter hand-delivered to his office related to fraud and abuse at WIAA, he'll just say he had nothing to do with it. And I think that's wrong. The buck should stop with the governor. He has not taken any action yet. We would like to see legislative action as well as action from the governor. So we'll be talking about this issue today. It's unfortunate that with so many issues of mismanagement and delay of action regarding WIAA and the Department of Corrections that we have to keep asking, but we'll be diligent in asking for action on these issues because the people of Wisconsin deserve better than what they've got right now.
Any questions?
Big picture question on just the way you mentioned 100 bills today, back tomorrow at 8 a.m. and then again on Thursday. Is this democratic, the way that the speaker is pushing this calendar through this week?
I would say that it's very clear. You cut out the public almost completely. We have the firefighters are in town this week. There's a couple other groups that are in town all week. We are going to hear from the State of the Tribes today. And I asked those individuals, I said, do you realize what bills are coming up today? He said, well, we read in the press 2 or 3 bills. Why, what's going on? I tell him there's 100 bills. He said, my God, how do you follow 100 bills? And obviously, it's hard for us. I mean, I spent a good portion of my weekend trying to go through and dissect these bills, some of which I think are going to be extremely harmful to our state. And it's very difficult. And, so we'll finish presumably tomorrow at some point. And then we've got to dig into the next pile of, 50, 60 bills. I don't know the exact number that'll be up on Thursday. But how does the public really interact? And the other interesting thing is that really caught my attention as I was going through this latest, roughly 100 bills that are before us, is when they put in the committee report and you say, okay, when the bill was introduced, here's when the hearing was held, here's who came to the hearing. What's so interesting about today's calendar, I encourage you to look at it, there's so many bills that virtually nobody showed up. And what's missing in these committee reports, which we're going to call for, is when was the committee called? Not only just when was it held, was there 24 hours notice given, 48 hours? How can the public possibly interact? And as Representative Pope indicated, obviously when you have something of great magnitude with the speaker taking a simple bill and trying to once again help the group that funds their campaigns more than any other group in the past election and most of probably the last 3 or 4 elections, well, people do take note of that. But there are so many other issues that are very important to local communities. I mean, today they'll have a bill to say that towns and counties can't issue IDs. Now, and then they finally came out and said, well, maybe they should be able to if they have some recreational facility. Maybe they should be able under this circumstance. But you know what? There's been 100 times, as Representative Shanklin's office uncovered, where they took away local control. This week, it's a bonanza for taking away local control. When you look, there's 15 more examples of that. So no, is this democratic? No, it really cuts out democracy. Unfortunately, for a state that's built a building that has probably more doors for access than any other building in the country, because we are a state that believes in people being engaged with their government. When they set up calendars like that, it's specifically to make sure that the public is not aware of all the harmful things that they're doing.
Should lawmakers get paid for the year if almost all lawmaking is done by the end of February?
I think that's a fair point. You know, it's hard for me to imagine. I mean, it seems like almost every year we actually cut back in terms of when we're going to be in session. And we are on the payroll the entire year. So why we would be done in February when we have a calendar for March, we have dates set aside in April. And I want to remind you, at the start of the session, we brought forward an amendment. We think we should have dates set aside in the fall, because we think that there are issues that come up, like take this issue of corrections, which is an extremely serious circumstance. And you know, perhaps if they were doing their job and having oversight hearings, maybe bills would come forward from that committee. And why we should not come back in session to address the serious issues that affect the citizens, I think is totally wrong.
So would you consider foregoing your paycheck for the rest of the year if there's no lawmaking being done?
Well, what I would propose, I mean, you know, I will say this, legislators do continue to work. There are, you know, there's committees that do meet throughout the year, whether it's finance, Joint Committee on Employment Relations, audit, then you have legislative council committees. We are here, and you are meeting, but to a much more limited degree. What I propose is that the legislature earn their keep, and that you have these weeks set aside. I mean, why we're going through, you know, and I know they always say don't talk about process, and that's why we try to talk about the impact of the citizens, but this does have an impact. People can't follow what's going on here, and it's self-imposed. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever why this should be the last week when we have, the Senate's gonna be back in March, but there's really no reason why we shouldn't be back in April as well, potentially. I think, you know, and as you can tell, they're very loath to come back in for special sessions, unless it's something that feathers their own nest. Then it seems like there's no problem on part of our Republican colleagues to come back in. But when it affects the citizens of this state, as some of the statistics I cited, third worst in transportation and infrastructure, third worst in student debt, you know, worst according to Pew Institute in terms of middle class. These are the issues people want us to address. So it's very frustrating, as you can tell.
Representative Kirkman has a bill up that would make it a felony to defraud the state's jobs agency, WEDC. Will any of your members be supporting that?
We actually will have an amendment, a substitute amendment on that will also do something that Senator Lassa and I brought up in the WEDC board, which is to say that when staff is aware of fraud going on, they should have to report it to the district attorney's office. There was support amongst many members of the WEDC board to do that. Unfortunately, in the final analysis, the administration decided to come up with this labyrinth process where a staff first brings it to the legal department, who brings it to the CEO, who then brings it to DOA, who then may bring it to the district attorney. So I think we'll have a sub that will actually, I think, be much more effective, but we'll include many of the provisions that she has. Any other questions for any other members? If not, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, you want to talk about
He's supposed to come in here. Yeah, that's what the email said. Yeah.
Doug, he's coming in here today.
Sorry.
I just saw the lesson. You said that this is going to be such a Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for being here during our last week of session for the year. Today, the Assembly will take up legislation that will improve the lives of almost every single person in Wisconsin. We're going to make our roads safer. We're going to make our schools better. We're going to make college more affordable. We're addressing the deadly heroin epidemic, and we're fighting fraud in government. And most importantly, we're making it easier to register to vote. The floor calendars this week are the result of hundreds of listening sessions, public hearings, and hours of committee work this session. We listened to our constituents and delivered on our promises. Many of you remember that more than a year ago, Assembly Republicans unveiled their forward agenda. I'm proud to tell you that we have approved a vast majority of our proposals, many with bipartisan support over the course of the past year. I anticipate another good floor day today, and we're going to highlight several of the most important bills that we're voting on today. And I'm going to begin with two that are offered by Representative Jim Ott. The first allowing appearance in court for first OWI offenses, and the other increasing penalties for multiple OWIs. Representative Ott.
Thank you, Robin. Good afternoon, everyone. The first bill is Assembly Bill 352, and it actually will require that all first-time OWI offenders make a personal appearance in court. As you know, first offense in Wisconsin is a civil forfeiture. It's not a criminal penalty. This would not actually increase the penalties unless the person decides to not show up in court, in which case there'd be a $300 surcharge placed upon them, and they would get an automatic default conviction in that case. Some counties and some municipalities in Wisconsin already require first offenders to appear in court. This would just make that requirement statewide for the counties and municipalities that don't right now. They would also require it. The purpose here is to impress upon first-time offenders the course that they're heading on is a destructive course and one that they want to change their behavior. And it's a lot different to be able to just send your attorney to court or send in your fine than to actually have to stand before the judge. So that's the purpose. Hopefully deterrence, hopefully getting the message out that OWI is serious, even though we don't consider first offense a criminal offense in Wisconsin. The second bill, there's an Assembly Bill 536. We're going to be taking up the Senate version of the bill 455 today. This bill does three things. Number one, it will make fourth offense OWI a felony no matter when it occurs. Right now, under current law, fourth offense is a felony if it occurs within 5 years of the third offense. This would just make all fourth offenses a Class H felony. The bill also will increase the felony category for each subsequent offense. So right now, fifth and sixth offense, OWI in Wisconsin, is considered a Class H felony. This would increase it to a Class G felony. Seventh, eighth, and ninth offense would go from a Class G felony to a Class F felony. This will give prosecutors and judges considerable more clout in being able to deal with the chronic repeat offenders that we keep hearing about in Wisconsin. People with fourth, fifth, and sixth offenses will be able to be dealt with more firmly by the court system. Again, our purpose is deterrence. We certainly hope that somebody with a third offense now, when the judge and when their lawyer tells them, do this again, you've got a felony on your record, regardless of when it occurs. There's not going to be any look back. And someone with a fourth offense, next offense is going to be a Class G felony. The bill also will correct a little glitch that we have in our statutes right now. Prosecutors cannot prosecute for causing simple injuriable OWI. In order to be prosecuted for causing injuriable OWI, the injury category has to either be in great bodily harm or substantial bodily harm. Simple injury, which would include things like causing cuts and bruises that don't require stitches and do not cause any broken bones, can't really be prosecuted as causing injury. This will allow prosecutors to also charge for causing injury while OWI. So that's the three things that these bills do. The Senate version did pass the Senate on a voice vote. I think it was last month at some point. So we're going to get that done in the Assembly today.
How do you guys afford that? I mean, it's got like a $97 million price tag, and with the state fiscal estimates what they are right now.
Well, what I really believe is that fiscal estimate is an overestimate, because again, the purpose of our OWI bills, in my opinion, is to cause less OWI in Wisconsin. And what the Department of Corrections typically does with these estimates is they'll just do steady state. Well, you have this many convictions if the penalty is this. If we increase the penalty, we're going to have the same number of convictions. My feeling is there's going to be less convictions because there is going to be a deterrent effect. So I think the cost is an overestimate. The other thing I would say is there's a tremendous cost placed upon Wisconsin residents, including the state, for OWI offenses right now. So to say this is going to have a big fiscal impact, I think drunk driving has a big fiscal impact on Wisconsin.
Jim, can you point to past bills? You've done this every session. Can you point to past bills where that has been the case, where the estimates have proved too significant?
Well, the last significant bill that was passed by the legislature was Act 100 back in 2009. And that's the one that required ignition interlocks and so on. And I guess we'd have to go back to that to see what the effect is today. Certainly, the incidence of drunk driving has continued to decline, not just because of tougher laws, but we also have safe ride programs and more education available today. But I wouldn't have any statistics for you that I have before me today on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Representative Amy Loudenbeck, who has two bills to discuss, one on child safety seat requirements and another to combat child sex trafficking. Representative Loudenbeck?
Assembly Bill 400 relates to the age at which infants should remain rear-facing in a child safety seat. Under current law, between the ages of 1 and 2, there are two options for child safety seat configuration. One is rear-facing, one is forward-facing. Back in 2011, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and other groups were very confident that the evidence that they had indicated that placing your child rear-facing until the age of 2 was 5 times safer than front-facing car seats between the ages of 1 and 2. The reason for this is really physiological for the child. The spinal cord is not developed and hardened, so it stretches. So if you are in a frontal impact collision, that spinal cord can stretch up to 2 inches and essentially cause what's referred to as an internal decapitation in the infant. And so, based on the evidence and the recommendations that parents are receiving from their pediatricians, from their AAA agent, from their insurance company, from all the experts in this field, from car seat installation instructors, we are putting the front-facing until 2 requirement into Wisconsin state law. It's already a mandate that child safety seats are required in Wisconsin. What this is doing is aligning our law with the evidence-based practices. For those that might call it a nanny law, I call it Newton's law. It's the law of physics. This is the safest placement for your child, and this bill will ensure that that is the standard in Wisconsin until age 2. Any questions? The second bill that I have today is providing child sex trafficking victims the ability to obtain enhanced services from the Child Protective System. Essentially, the federal requirements that are coming forward from the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act require Wisconsin to conduct a child abuse investigation when the child is being potentially trafficked by a non-caregiver. Under current law, if the caregiver or your parent or foster parent or other guardian type of person is guilty or alleged to be trafficking a youth, then that youth would become eligible for services. What this bill does is say that non-caregivers, which are actually the majority of traffickers for young people, that in the case of alleged abuse by a non-caregiver, that child would be screened in by the Child Protective Services system, would possibly have a CHIPS order, there would be an investigation opened, the child would be placed in a safe place, and would be eligible for services. So this is a really major deviation from current law. Since 2011, I've been working on the anti-human trafficking legislation. Wisconsin has gone from being a tier 2 state to a tier 3 state to a tier 1 state, according to some of the organizations, national organizations that track this. This is really an important piece of that because without the services and without the training for the CPS workers that are screening in these youth, there's really some concern that we are really missing those vulnerable populations and not able to provide them with the needed services. And so that's what this bill does. And I am happy to be working on it. Representative Johnson and Representative Billings had a bill that related to child sex trafficking services that also had some other policy changes in it. So this aligns with it. It does it in a different way, but it's a bipartisan bill. Has a lot of really good support from the advocacy groups, and has already been passed by the Senate this morning. So this will be its final step before the governor's desk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nope, that's fine. The next bill that we have, Representative Joe Sanfilippo has a bill today that addresses the issue of communities creating their own photo IDs. Representative Sanfilippo.
What this bill does is address the issue of which local governments can issue local ID cards, what those cards should look like, and what they can be used for, and also who can pay for them. Any questions?
Yes, are you going to pass the Malone County debt bill this week? Passing that thing?
I don't know. Right now I'm working on local IDs.
Yes, I am working with Representative Canoto to try to be able to put an amendment on one of the bills or to bring a bill forward that would allow Milwaukee County to recover the ability to do that. Yes. No questions about Representative Sanfilippo's bill, so obviously that's unanimous support. That's good. Representative Samantha Kirkman has two bills up today. The first fights UI fraud, and the other deals with issues related to WIAA. Representative Kirkman.
Thank you, Speaker Voss. So the first bill, UI theft bill, came about when I did the two strikes unemployment bill a few months ago. This one just brings our theft statutes, our UI theft statutes, in line with our traditional theft statutes to bring uniformity across the board. If you fraud, food share and you fraud UI, it should be uniform in the theft world. The second bill is the WEDC bill that I've been working on. Came about with an audit, several audits that have happened in WEDC. Senator Hansen and myself, he got his bill out first and realized that our bill drafts weren't too far apart, so we sat down and crafted a bipartisan piece of legislation that will be on the floor today. There is one amendment that's going to be offered just to clarify, to make sure that there are no unintended consequences when it comes to a business who might have bought a piece of equipment or hired maybe 75 employees and maybe doesn't do a third shift like they intended to. They didn't get the big job. So again, it allows them to make a change order in their contract if they so need, but it really puts on the books if you fraud out and lie on your application, that there is a statute on the books that a local district attorney can utilize in the future.
Do you think your bill has a path forward in the Senate?
I hope so. I'm hopeful. I've reached out. I've got several Republican senators on board, Senator Kapenga, Senator Wongard, and have reached out to my colleagues in the other house to see if I can get it through.
Okay, no other questions? Thank you very much. Next up, we have Representative Nygren, who has 5 bills from his HOPE agenda on the calendar today, and a 6th bill on a different topic related to open records with the WIAA. Representative Nygren?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, this has been a continuation of the HOPE agenda, obviously started last session. 5 bills today. The focus really this session, last session really, a lot of the conversation dealt with heroin, and rightfully so, the concern with people throughout our state with the deaths we are seeing from heroin addiction. But where it starts in most cases is prescription drugs, and trying to change that conversation for the public to have a true understanding that yes, this could happen in their community, yes, it could happen even in their household. So a number of the bills today we have already passed have dealt with focusing on prescription drug monitoring, and some of the bills we're dealing with today will also, we'll talk about that in a second. But treatment and diversion. So in last budget, we actually initially doubled the amount of dollars we put into treatment and diversion programs, and we quadrupled it. And this session, we're putting another $2 million a year into treatment and diversion programs. Treatment and diversion programs have proven to be successful in reducing recidivism rates in our state. Recidivism rates on these drug crimes oftentimes is nearing 100%. But drug courts and other programs like that have been proven successful in to reduce those recidivism rates and reduce the long-term costs of corrections. Last round of grants that went out for treatment and diversion programs, there are a number of counties that applied that we weren't able to fund. This is allowing for additional counties to step up and say we want to take part in something that's been proven to be successful at reducing our recidivism rates in the state. Next bill deals with a masking agent or synthetic urine. Actually, employers in my area have talked to me about this. In the manufacturing facilities, it is very dangerous for people that are using opiates and other types of drugs to be dealing with heavy equipment. But while most employers are screening for these drugs, there actually are masking agents that are available at the local, we used to call them head shops, for you to be able to escape a positive drug test. So this bill would address that issue and criminalize the sale of that drug, or that masking agent here in Wisconsin. Additionally, streamlining regulations. Treatment has continued to be one of the issues that, while we've got people that want to escape the cycle of addiction, having access to treatment has continued to be a problem. One of the things we've identified is that Wisconsin actually has an additional level of bureaucracy or regulation over and above that of the federal government. So this bill will actually streamline our regulation of treatment programs, making it consistent with the federal government, allowing us to potentially open more beds for treatment. If we've got people that are willing to break that cycle of addiction, that want to break that cycle of addiction, yet we don't have the treatment available to them, that is actually a significant problem. So this will help streamline that issue. Best practices for prescribing. This is something that the medical examining board and other examining boards dealing with the medical profession have stepped forward and said, you know what, we want to lead on this issue. Wisconsin has been a leader on the opiate issue here in our state. But rather than the legislature, who we like to think that we know everything, from time to time, we don't always know what's best for the patient. So actually this empowers the examining boards to work within their profession to to write guidelines that make sense for those individual practices when dealing with opiate prescribing. So AB 660 will deal with that. Reporting requirements. So as we're requiring implementation of a new program dealing with prescription drug monitoring program and utilization by doctors of that program, we want to make sure that the information that's collected is actually working, that it's actually reducing opiate addiction in our state. And by writing certain requirements into state statutes saying that what information we're seeking will actually help us better utilize and better evaluate whether the programs are actually working. So AB 766 deals with reporting requirements dealing with the prescription drug monitoring program. The final bill deals with WIAA. It's actually being called the WIAA bill, but what it basically says is that any school that participates in intercollegiate athletic associations has to be, the Intercollegiate Athletic Association has to be subject to open records. We have gotten a lot of press on this issue throughout the state in the last couple months. I think everybody's aware of some of the national media that came down on us. I actually believe the conversations I've had with WIAA, this will actually help them be more transparent, help them when they make a decision, the public is aware of it ahead of time, and perhaps maybe a little bit more spotlight on the issue. We won't have those glaring issues that have stepped forward over the last few months. So I believe this is common sense. I believe the more transparency dealing with WIAA will help them be better at their job. We've had a friendly dialogue to this point. There will be an amendment clarifying that clarifying that referees are independent contractors and that personnel records of independent contractors would not be subject to open records law. That has been a concern. Honestly, that was actually a concern that came from my caucus. We have had no specific concerns brought to us by WIAA. Questions?
Okay, thank you. Next up, Representative Mary Chaya has a bill that continues our efforts to improve mental health in Wisconsin regarding a behavioral health care pilot project. Representative Chaya?
Thank you. AB 408 is a result of the Speaker's Task Force on Mental Health. One of the things that we heard, and we heard repeatedly, is a lot of people that have mental health issues are not getting the care that they need on a regular basis to get them to a good quality of life and to get them back into a positive manner. So what was suggested is a pilot program so that we can really examine the cost and the benefits. And what we're going to do is, the first part of it is the healthcare coordination pilot, so that doctors and mental health providers are coordinating care for people, and the mental health patients aren't just going to the emergency room and not getting a continuous treatment of care, and we can have some better outcomes on that. The second one is a psychiatric consult reimbursement pilot for Medicaid. What we find a lot of times is our psychiatrists are not being reimbursed, or they're not being accessed because there is no reimbursement, so that when primary care physicians are contacting them, there isn't a good coordination between the two of them. This is going to increase the Medicaid payments to our psychiatrists and allow them to be involved from day one so that we can get people to a good place. The third portion of this is a mental health bed tracking program. Currently, right now, what we heard is if you have someone who's admitted into your hospital or into your emergency room with mental health issues, nurses are literally sitting on the phone, calling around, trying to find some place to place these people to get them the care that they need. So we're going to have a mental health bed tracking system that'll be on the internet, and they will just be able to look up, click on that, get in contact. There's two outcomes to this. The first and primary outcome that we're looking for this is a better quality of life for people that suffer from mental health issues. And the second priority is for taxpayer dollars. We need to make sure that the dollars that are going into these programs are getting spent in the best way, and we can get the most services and resources to the people that really need them. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Representative Joel Kitchens has two education bills today, one also dealing with mental health and the other dealing with a pilot project. So we'll talk about those. Representative Kitchens.
Okay, thank you. AB 664 also came out of the Speaker's Task Force on Mental Health, and it's seeking to address the needs of our school-age students in getting better and more effective mental health care. Studies show that 20% of our students suffer from some sort of mental health issue, and that if we can get early intervention to them, they're far more likely to graduate and go on to successful lives. So under current law, DHS requires that anybody providing mental health care in a school set up a clinic in that school, and that they have a designated room strictly for that, and that they keep the records there. What this bill will do is that it will allow other mental health care providers to go into the school without having to set up a permanent office within that school. And again, studies show that that students are far more likely to receive mental health care if they can do it within the school, and they avoid the absences from school, as well as the questions from their classmates about why they were gone, and sort of the stigma that's often attached to mental health problems. I think Representative Tittle has some things to add, and there is an amendment being offered.
Basically, it actually is one of the greatest things. Last session, Speaker had a task force on mental health, and he decided to continue on this session with chairing me as Mental Health Reform Committee. I think it's one of the great things that we're doing is we're not sticking our head in the sand about mental health issues with the state of Wisconsin and across this nation, is that we're actually going to address this, and there'll be some more mental health bills coming on Thursday. And just wanted to thank the Speaker for his forethought in bringing forth a committee like this. I think it's very important. The amendment that we'll be bringing forth today, basically what it does is it says that the DHS will then get a waiver from the federal government allowing them to receive payment, so that the people that are providing the services in the school would get payment actually for the mental health services. I think it's crucial to reducing stigma. And stigma is our number one thing that we saw out of the mental health crisis. So thank you very much. With that, we can take questions.
I have a question about another one of your guys' bills, 8493, the one on the construction
I don't think that's what we're talking about right now, so.
That's Representative Kitchen's bill.
Yeah, oh, okay. I'll step aside then.
Okay. The other bill I want to talk about is AB 734. And this came out of the work group that we had meeting this summer on the future of education, and it really is designed to meet dual needs. The first problem that we have is that we have so many businesses that are just begging for skilled workers around the state. These are high-paying jobs that generally do not require a 4-year degree. And the other problem is at the same time that we have this shortage and it's really holding our businesses back, we have many students graduating with 4-year degrees, and they are saddled with high debt, and they can't find work within their field of study. So what this bill would do is create a pilot program that would be administered jointly between DPI and DWD, and they would accept grants, and one of the CESAs would be awarded a grant to hire a workforce education coordinator. And this person would work with the local businesses within the whole region to expose students to these opportunities that are out there, and they would also help to provide the opportunities for them to have better guidance, and not just for the students but for their parents as well, because oftentimes that's sort of the roadblock to this thing. We just want to provide students with better information so that they really understand what their choices are and all the great opportunities that are out there. Are there any questions about that bill?
Okay. Next up, Representative Adam Nealon has 3 bills, one dealing with school accountability, another dealing with STEM, and another dealing with missing children notification. Representative Nealon?
Thank you. A lot of people talk about robots taking away the jobs out there right now, but if you think about the flip side, there's an entire industry developing of people that need to build and manage the robots. Every single manufacturing facility in Wisconsin right now either has a robot technician or is going to have to hire one as we continue to integrate and every device is connected to the internet. If we're serious about closing the skills gap, we need to invest in the next generation of our workforce. That's why I introduced the Robotics League grant. It's a participation program where schools that have robotics teams are able to apply for up to $5,000 grant that will be administered through the DPI, and it will either go to schools that currently have robotics teams to help pay for a mentorship or a coaching the same way a sport would have a coach, or it's going to go to help create brand new robotics teams throughout Wisconsin. There's about 100 robotics teams that currently compete at the varsity level per se in the robotics division. Our goal would be to increase that number by 15% to really, and then show the demand and then continue to invest in our next generation workforce like with robotics. I mean, if you look at just drones alone, a small section of robotics, it's an exploding industry that's going to be a $15 billion industry in the next few years. And we can be ahead of that curve. We can develop the workers right here and develop robotics right here, but we need to invest in it. And this is a great opportunity because it's a participation program. Kids that are interested in joining a robotics team will have more opportunity to join a robotics team. And I don't know if anybody's actually gone to these competitions, but they're incredible. They build these battle bots that compete in games, that they create brand new games every year. And they have large teams, up to 40 students on one team. And all the students have different jobs and roles to fill. And it's just a really great opportunity for students in Wisconsin. And we're really proud to be doing what we can to help facilitate more robotics technicians, more kids interested in STEMs, more women involved in the field. And I think it's a really exciting that we're able to join together and pass a bill like this. The other 2 bills, one is another education bill. You know, sometimes the best answer is the most simple. And when you talk about school accountability, there is no better way to hold schools accountability than just to provide easy, objective data the parents can evaluate. Right now we have really good performance data out there. There's some ways we can improve it, but it exists now. The problem is not a lot of teachers know how to access that data because you got to go onto the DPI's home site and then look through their data and then find the school report card. Now, we have taken steps in this past budget. We have said that school districts should have to have a link to their performance evaluations right on their district website. But this bill takes the next step and says if a school that's sponsoring a website, they should link on their homepage to that performance data. They don't have to create anything new. This isn't an unfunded mandate because it's not going to cost more than just putting a link on their homepage to information that's already out there. But it will be easier for parents to find and then really put the power in the hands of the parents because we trust parents. We trust parents to make the best decision for their student and for their family. So this is just a really good way to hold schools accountable without any heavy-handed maneuver that, opposed to just providing objective data to parents. That is really the goal with this bill, and I think it accomplishes that in a very simple way. And then my final bill on the calendar today that is asked to speak about was the Stop Trafficking Vulnerable Youth Act. It's a bill to improve the communication between child welfare agencies and law enforcement. Because right now, we have certain restrictions on the ability to share information like pictures would be a good example. So child welfare agencies have a difficult time sharing information like pictures with law enforcement. So we're talking about children that are in state care. They're either in foster cares or group homes. And these are the most vulnerable children in our state. They don't have a parent to look out for them. It is our responsibility to do everything we can to keep them safe. So if that way is to improve the sharing between law enforcement and child welfare agencies, I thought that would be a noble thing to work on, and I'm proud to have it on the floor today and hope to get it signed into law. I'm willing to take any questions. Excellent. And I appreciate your attentiveness. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. Next up, Representative Dave Murphy has taken the lead in the Assembly to help make college more affordable, along with efforts from Governor Walker. He's offered 4 different bills talking about the issue of college affordability, emergency grants for students, internships for UW system students, coordinating with DWD, and the educational cost disclosure bill, along with Representative Mako, who has authored the bill to allow for tax deductibility of student loan interest. So I'd ask both of them to step forward and talk about their bills.
Thank you, Robin. We don't have anything quite as exciting as fighting robots to talk about, but we'll try to give you a little background on the college affordability package that we put together, 6 bills, AB 39 through AB 44. Representative Mako was the author on 739, so he's here and would be able to take any questions on that. But the package is a step towards, in the positive direction of trying to keep student costs low. Obviously, the Republican agenda has been to freeze tuition to keep that low. This builds on top of that. It gives financial literacy information to students. There are increased grants, and there are increased income tax deductions. We want to connect Wisconsin students with employers to reduce the brain drain from Wisconsin. And I guess with that, I would just entertain any questions on the package.
Concerned that this isn't get through the Senate as it is?
I'm always concerned about everything. So certainly, problems come up. I feel confident, though, working with our leads in the Senate, that they're going to work hard to help us get this passed.
I think it's also important to note that Governor Walker has really been a champion for these proposals. Many of those, obviously, Representative Murphy worked with the administration to create, and Governor Walker has been a forceful advocate for these proposals all around the state, and I think he'll continue to build public support so eventually become law.
Yeah, and I'd just like to thank the governor for some of his visits around the area, around the state, and yeah, he's definitely been very helpful.
And the only thing that I would add is that I take President Cross at his word under Chairman Murphy's leadership in hearings, that he talks about this being just the first step. That the first thing to make college expenses less is to incur the debt, is to not incur the debt in the first place. So I think this is one of many, many things that we're going to continue to look at, including changing the amount of credits required to graduate, to all kinds of other neat ideas that he has that we're anxious to hear about. But I think under Mr. Murphy's guidance, this is a good first step.
Okay. Lastly, we have a couple bills, one dealing with Representative Kathy Bernier as the author, which will allow for electronic voter registration, really online registration, increasing the opportunity for people all across the state with an iPad to be able to register folks to vote. Representative Bernier.
Thank you. I like to look at this as an election modernization bill. I think Representative Nealon pointed out, rightfully so, that our society and economy and technology is changing every day. And as I see most of you with your iPads and your smartphones and all of the technology that you are utilizing, it only makes sense that we encourage election integrity and election efficiency in the most modern way possible in a 21st century style. So first of all, we're going to talk about electronic voter registration. I think that explains itself. We will have real-time checks on the information that's put in. You will know as an elector that your registration has been accepted and you're ready to go to the polls. Electronic Registration Information Center is an organization of member states that allow for checking registration forms to see if you're registered in more than one state. If you've moved from one state to the other, that you will have cleaner, better voter rolls in the state as well. Election registration officials, the special registration deputies, will not be needed as such. One of the criteria and one of the money-saving aspects of online voter registration is to reduce the paper, and the paper is what causes a lot of the cost to local governments. It is the one thing that's going to reduce the cost to local governments. We are also, there's a provision in the statute. We can test election inspectors, but we can't test or knowledge-based testing for chief inspectors. We're just going to eliminate that provision. Also, proof of residency in residential care facilities was an issue. A lot of this is cleanup, good legislation. The County Clerks Association stated that they believe that most of these, or all of these provisions, are very good provisions. I've worked closely with municipal clerks and county clerks on this bill, and I think it's a good modernization bill.
Any questions? Okay, and lastly, Representative John Jagler has two bills, one dealing with school transparency and the other needs with special needs scholarships. Representative Jagler?
Good afternoon. AB 517 is a bill that requires school crime data to be placed on the school report cards. Right now, information about school crimes in schools is not available to anyone except through an open records request to the police department. It's modeled after the Clery Act, which requires colleges to do the very same thing. It breaks it down and puts it on the report card as we give more educational choices for parents, whether it's the school choice program, open enrollment, online classes and things like that. I think as we give them more options, we should give them more information. So that is what 517 does. AB 571 is a cleanup of the special needs bill. Some of the things the Department of Instruction came to us and asked for, worked very closely along with Senator Vukmir to put those in there. AB 751 also does something that we care very deeply about. Right now in the open enrollment, or the special needs program, the only kids that are allowed are kids who were denied open enrollment coming or going. And the way it was written in current law is they were denied open enrollment in the previous year. That left out some of the very same families who came and testified about the need for this bill, about how the system worked or did not work for them, it failed them. This would have a rollback in, so those parents who weren't denied in the previous year because they gave up will now be able to take part in the program. There was an amendment attached to it, as you all know, by Speaker Voss. That was last week. we have a different amendment coming. It is my understanding the Senate is going to send this bill over to us in its current form, clean, then we will amend it to take care of a little bit of the skim issue that was involved that some schools are taking advantage of in levying for kids that they did no longer attend that left for the choice program.
Okay, and with that, very long press availability. Thank you for waiting until the end. Thank you for your attention. We have the State of the Tribes address today, so we are already way beyond our normal time. And I know I have seen a bunch of senators who are not used to being on time going like this in the back of the room, telling me we should be done. So with that, I'll be here all day. Happy to take questions from you guys throughout the course of the day.
48-hour waiting period. Parents of a Madison girl who died in a handgun-related shooting recently calling me to reinstate the 48-hour waiting period. How are you responding to that?
I'll have to take a look. I haven't seen the information that they must have sent to my office. I've been busy kind of finalizing our calendar. Of course, every single situation we empathize with the families who have to go through a tragedy. Probably, once again, I don't know the details of the case, so I don't want to comment on specifics, but I would say that by and large, we know that the vast majority of people who own a firearm do no harm to others and usually protect themselves. So I'd have to take a look at the specifics and take a look at it.
Well, Senator Fitzgerald's county executive bill, will that get a vote in December?
Yeah, I think that the county exec bill is a good one to say that we already have passed in the past sessions that we don't want people double dipping. I certainly think that doing a job as a legislator requires a great deal of dedication. You know, I obviously have a small business, but I work, this is my full-time job. I'm not paid by the taxpayers more than once, so I certainly think his idea, should it get to the Senate, will be one that we talk about here in the Assembly.
All right, guys, I'll help you connect you guys later on.
How many bills are going through this week?
Sure.
Peter says no.
Yeah, well, I'll go back and look at the exact number of bills that they took up in their final week of session. I have a feeling it was a similar number. It's just the process that we go through every 2 years. If you look at how many bills were introduced at the end, many bills were introduced at the end of the session. You know, we've had a hearing, we've gone through the process. Many of these were from the beginning of the session. So it's just the end where we always get to that point where people want to get stuff done. So thank you.
Can you guys, in the Senate, can you guys still pass it here?
I do not know which week. I have to take a look.
I believe it gives another month for implementation of the ESPS.
I'll find out. I gotta take a look.
Yeah, we did. Thank you so much for
Yeah, we'll get some of that.
Well, I know the things said the same
That's why
I know.